Hell yeah. You know what I'm saying?
San Andreas is a game front and center on the Mount Rushmore of so many different categories. It's one of the most beloved video games of all time. Its attention to interesting characters is storytelling excellence, technical achievement, and is just as relevant playing today as the time period it represents. Rockstar's masterclass in game design from October 2004 teaches us not only the modern standards for world building and open world structure, but also that relation it has to the narrative and the player. A product reaching influence far beyond those who've played it to generations that may not even know what a Grand Theft Auto is. Seriously, my grandma knew what Grand Theft Auto was, for Christ's sake, and she'd already had 4 kids before the Atari 2600 was invented. I mean, there are just no words that can describe how huge this title was to the gaming world and pop culture as we know it today. So, I've been sat here at my desk stun-locked for weeks now, just trying to fathom how I can possibly do this game justice. I mean, this isn't just an important game to me, it's an important game for everybody. You know, and the more I think about it, the more I just think back to all of my memories playing this game in my formative years. You know, it really shaped my taste for gaming, shaped my taste in music and film. So I want to start at the beginning with my introduction to not only San Andreas, but GTA as a whole, the PlayStation 2, as well as my introduction to artistic creative passion and making videos like I'm still doing all these years later. So, look, if you're not interested in all of the mushy stuff and are just here for the strictly analytical essay part of the video, then feel free to skip ahead to the next chapter. But for those of you looking for some warm, nostalgic feelings and don't mind going back to the past, then allow me the honor of telling you my San Andreas story. The first time I laid eyes on San Andreas was almost 20 years ago. I was 8 years old over at a friend's house after school, and their older brother and all of his mates were crowded around the TV. See, they had a PS2, whereas all I had at home was my PS1, which, you know, I obviously treasured, of course, but that was all I knew. So when those harsh tones of orange bled through the crowd to the sound of police sirens above the hum of a CRT, I caught a glimpse of some crazy action like nothing I'd ever seen before. But I can remember so vividly what impressed me the most was seeing a car crash into a traffic pole and seeing the lights come crashing to the ground, fences splintering and destruction of the environment. Man, I'd never seen anything so realistic in a game before, and the fact that this looked like real life, it was immediately relatable to my little mind and a gateway to being a big boy, playing adult and growing up. It was almost spiritual, which is the lamest analogy ever, but man, it blew my mind and never left my conscious thought. But at this friend's house, I never got to play the game, only watch. So fast forward, I get my PS2, and starting out, you only have a small handful of games, so I was always renting more at the video store. The initial release popularity must have passed by this time, so my mum didn't know what it was, but I was always a respectable, mature kid, so the rating must not have bothered her. So finally, I got to play it for the first time, and I actually didn't play it. What I mean is that I didn't know how to play it. Seriously, I jumped on that bike and started riding around the map, just exploring. I didn't understand that I was supposed to travel to this icon. It didn't even leave an imprint on my brain because all I cared about was driving cars around and messing with people on the street in true sandbox style. It's crazy, man. I can remember this like it was yesterday. I would get myself killed, spawn at the hospital, and from here, I knew exactly how to travel through the Vinewood Hills along this same path and get myself to the beach, which is where I always saw all of the older kids hanging out when they'd play this, right? Don't ask me why I didn't just drive directly there. I like driving past all the big houses, okay? Dreaming of one day owning such a grandiose mansion. What I'd do once I arrived at the beach is I used to get all the traffic stuck under the pier and kick their headlights in until there was mass destruction and carnage, then run around grabbing all of the cash because I wanted to try and buy this beachfront property so badly. I knew what The Sims was at this point. Perhaps I thought because everything else is so realistic that maybe I can live here for the rest of my time playing. I don't know. But because I hadn't properly started the game, I didn't know how to save my progress, so every night after school for that entire week I rented the game, I'd have to start this process over and over, get myself killed, find my way back to the beach and start earning all of my money back. All unbeknownst to my mum that didn't understand the demon she'd unleashed upon my innocent little soul. But it was around this time that violent video game paranoia was at its peak with the sentencing of Devon Moore, who famously stated, "Life is a game, everyone's gotta die sometime," after killing 3 officers in a police station and linked back to his fixation on Vice City. So my mum quickly banned me from playing these games. Now 2007 hits, my cousins got an Xbox and GTA San Andreas, and suddenly I wanted to have sleepovers all the time. Mum wasn't stoked on the idea, but you know, they weren't her kids, and she trusted me to stay in line and not play the game I was banned from, which I absolutely didn't until a point not so long after where I finally caved and gave it a go. I'd watch my cousins play all day, and then when it was bedtime and they were tired, I'd stay up late and finally get my turn to play, and man, it was great. That went on for a little while until my mum was early to pick me up one day and she saw me playing the forbidden game, and man, that's the earliest memory I've had of her being so just gutturally disappointed in me. I could draw you a picture of her face. By this point, I was 11 years old, and I'd just gotten my very first computer at home and discovered YouTube, so there wasn't a whole lot she could really do to stop me from seeing the game, but what I was seeing was the early stages of YouTube and what was, at the time, the purest form of machinima and indie filmmaking. None of this Gmod stuff, I'm talking pure gameplay with Windows Movie Maker text explaining what is happening. Recorded on a PC if you were lucky, but mostly recorded directly off of the TV like this as the norm. And man, I fucking loved it. San Andreas for me is the birth for my love of storytelling, filmmaking, getting creative, and just having fun doing it. If you can make something out of life, then your life is well spent and no time was wasted. I was watching air crash investigation videos, GTA mythology and you know, cryptic theories, horror movies and music videos. Hell, I was watching Jackass made in San Andreas. It was the tits, man, and I just wanted to be a part of this community so bad, so for my 12th birthday, I pleaded with my mum, look, this is what I want to do. I want to create. Sure, I want to play the game as well, and that probably means I'm going to see the bad stuff, but surely I'm old enough now. And so finally, the game was permanently in my possession. And this is my original copy too. See inside the crusty old poster that lived on my walls for over a decade, the awfully printed out cheat codes and maps to hidden collectibles. And man, you know what the first thing was I did in the game when I finally got it? Yep, I got right back to work earning that beach house. It's always such a blast for me looking back on this stuff and, you know, not just reliving those formative memories, but it's also humble beginnings for me as a creator and a passionate storyteller. Okay, so this was our first family camera. Yes, I've still got it. It was a birthday gift to my mum, but ultimately I absorbed all responsibility for it. What I used to do was I'd set this thing up, right, on the couch or like prop it up on like a table or something and point it at the TV screen and film the game while I was playing it. You know, I'd film all these stupid stunts or like I'd film some of the missions and just try and get all these cool, funny clips together to edit into these little retro machinima videos. It was all just me trying to emulate what I'd seen on YouTube, you know, really trying to just get creative, have fun, and really discover what, you know, an artistic passion was. We've certainly come a long way since then, thank God, but yeah, man, that's the story of how San Andreas got me interested in content creation. What you're seeing here are my early GTA videos because I'm proud of this and I want to share that with you guys, even though I know I'm not special. I know that everyone has their own unique stories with this game and franchise, so please, I encourage you to share your unique memories with a comment down below. I just wanted to open this video for one of the most important games of my life with a more personal touch. Because now that I finally had the game in my possession, the world that I was about to discover would be unlike anything else I'd ever played before or since. So, let's get to it.
Oh shit, here we go again.
Alright, you all know the story here, but are you familiar with the introduction? Rockstar released a prequel film along with the special PS2 edition of the game in North America, which details some basic setup for each of the different characters and narrative arcs taking place across the 3 different counties in the game. But this also completes a canonical circle that connects this trilogy with its important middle part of the timeline. Set in the heat of early 90s California amidst very real-life conflicts of race, drugs and corruption, makes for the perfect foundation for building a great story with iconic and dramatized yet still relatable characters. CJ, voiced by young Melee, takes centre stage as the outcast returning home to family tragedy to try and take back his old stomping grounds from the evil that's taken over, but almost immediately intercepted by Crash, finds himself on a tightrope walk of responsibilities and loyalty. Sam Jackson fits the role of Officer Tenpenny expertly, probably the most effective celebrity voice in a video game role, even to this day. He's just such a slimy cocksucker. I love it. With this game immediately comes a newfound sense of grit and attitude. While the action can still be somewhat cartoonish at times and dialogue quite sarcastic, the overall tone of the game feels much more serious than prior entries, and I think that can be attributed to the team's research. Rockstar have always gone above and beyond to visit the real-world equivalents of the locations they repurpose, and in doing so, allow the player to touch base at ground level and relate to our surroundings. And like last time, the accumulation of an appropriate cast is once again the key to authenticity in portraying the atmosphere of these mean streets. While the pacing starts off a little slower than previous titles, which is necessary given the sheer scope of the game, which at this point just starting out still feels impossible even after all of these years, it doesn't drag on and actually presents a much greater opportunity to get personal with characters and the world like never before. I knew that Vice City was a small game, but my god, by the halfway point, once all of the cards are out on the table, San Andreas has not even begun to expand on its open world yet, which is of course going to be a major talking point of the video, which we'll get to in good time. I don't want to rush things here either. It's really important to me that I get this video right. With so many gameplay enhancements taking center stage, such as improved gun combat and stealth carried over from the first Manhunt game, the on-foot gameplay is better than ever before. In fact, I'd say this is probably the first time a GTA game had you spend more time outside of the vehicles, jumping fences through back gardens, climbing around spraying tags, and building muscle are all key ingredients to expanding upon what was possible within the sandbox. And that's not to say that the driving hasn't also improved, with much tighter controls while at high speeds and turning, with the possibility to roll your vehicle back onto its wheels if you crash. Nothing like we'd see in GTA 5, but still a noticeable improvement many might take for granted. But put all of that aside, this game is really all about the player and their story this time around, sparing no mundane details. How does he look? What clothes does he wear? Is he fit enough for the adventure at our fingertips? That's the step the series needed to take after Vice, which, as I mentioned in my previous video, struggled somewhat with Tommy Vercetti being a mere clone of an already established fictional character. The beauty of CJ, aside from those chiseled muscles and handsome smile, is that even though we're able to put our own spin on him, his character is still much more defined and uniquely original. And like I mentioned, it doesn't matter the colour of your skin or the environment that you grew up in, this character and his immediate trials and personal conflicts are so relatable to every player. We've all had family arguments, we've all had to return home at some point, mix with new crowds, and find a way to make life work amongst all of the chaos going on around us. I mean, they just absolutely nailed it, which is insane to me because creating relatable characters can be such a tumultuous thing to try and balance correctly. And sure, maybe I'm a bit blinded by rose-tinted glasses here, I'm not gonna lie, but that doesn't change the fact that I'm already fully torqued at a potential 8 out of 10 for this game, despite not even really starting the game yet. Which really just depicts just how monumentally successful this title was and the role that it played within gaming's greater evolution. And it doesn't end there, not even close. What really gives all of your action weight and longevity is the newly incorporated RPG elements such as stamina, respect, lung capacity. Yeah, finally, we can get our feet wet with the abundance of fresh new attributes which further flesh out our pro tag. Earlier GTA games did have, to some extent, driving skills, which made it less likely you would flip your car, and certain upgrades that you could earn which would improve your health and all of that, which are still as ever present in San Andreas, but the larger focus on this balance of life is what really sets it apart from everything else that was available at the time. I want to call this part of the video living and breathing, because that's exactly what this is. This is no longer just a simulation of reality, a virtual playpen to let all of your immature fantasies run wild. It's, for lack of a better term, real, I guess. CJ is more of a Tamagotchi than he is a man. If he gets hungry, then his health depletes and you've got to feed his tummy. If he eats too much, then he gets sick. An unhealthy diet is a one-way ticket to dying, so we can't let him get too fat or we won't be able to roll him out of harm's way. But he's also got to get strong and learn how to handle himself in heated situations. That way, when he comes out on top, he gains respect, which means more people will back you up, the less people will fuck with your shit, and you can spend more time enjoying the finer things in life like your hobbies, gambling, and laying serious pipe all over town. Oh, did I mention there is a sex appeal stat? Yeah, every molecule of this stud's being is tracked by the player's actions and needs to be conditioned evenly in order to maintain balance. It's absolutely batshit. The only thing stopping this from turning into The Sims is if CJ had a piss and shit mechanic. The point I'm making here is that every detail of the game mechanics are so much more ingrained into the experience, which, yes, can create some tedium as it can all feel a little bit overwhelming at times. And look, I play games to escape from feeling overwhelmed in my day-to-day, so when I'm more concerned with CJ's tummy rumbles than my own because I accidentally forgot to eat while playing this game all day, then you know that this is a next level immersive experience. Not only do these different attributes all work together in helping to make CJ feel very human, but they contribute a lot to the open world too. We can now visit gyms to adjust our stats and train in different hand-to-hand combat styles, which are all purely a cosmetic decision, changing which animations will play out, but hey, it's a neat idea. There's multiple restaurants that exist around the map to refill your health, and a wide range of clothing outlets, tattoo stores, and even hairdressers to fulfill all of your customization desires. Now, the funny thing about this is that Tony Hawk's American Wasteland kind of lazily copied this idea, for better or worse. But what that created was a sort of schoolyard rumour that future GTA and Tony Hawk games were going to be so realistic that characters' hair would grow over the course of the game and you'd have to regularly go to hairdressers to get a clean snip and, you know, go into shops to change your clothes and stuff like that. Which is really funny that that idea was getting tossed around 20 years ago, because now all these years later, we have Red Dead Redemption 2, which really was the first game that I think expertly achieved that concept. But, you know, I remember thinking at the time that sounded so boring. Like, who cares if the character's hair grows or if their clothes get dirty? I just want to play the damn game. So, if I had that stance on it, why didn't I think that all of this other stuff was boring at the time? Because, on the contrary, I actually loved it. It just made sense in San Andreas. I feel like I've heard the complaint before from a subsection of players that all of this RPG and realism stuff was kind of a turn off for them playing San Andreas, and look, I can understand. The game certainly takes every detail to the extreme in certain areas, but personally, I find that it works because of how it fleshes out the world. You know, the same way that stores could be entered and robbed in Vice City, there was more to see beyond the linear missions. Now, while travelling between jobs, you might make the stop to freshen up your look or grind out for better stats. Sometimes missions can't be accepted unless it's within a certain time of the day, so what else are you supposed to do while you wait? Go off and experience the other side of what the game has to offer. Which leads me perfectly into obviously the biggest section of the video where I gush about how awesome this map is for 20 minutes. But let's get analytical and really dig a little bit deeper into what actually makes San Andreas such an involved, fleshed out world worthy of all of its praise, and discuss perhaps some of the downsides as well. Look, it's hard to fault this playground that we have access to, as it's like no other of its era, and even unlike many since. I mean, it really set the standard for modern open world games, precedents which are still meticulously and religiously enforced by consumer expectations to this day. One of my big complaints for Vice regarding the map was its use of space, how vast some areas could be without anything there to see. And a few people pointed out that you really just had to be there at the time, because that didn't matter in 2002. The game still felt bigger than anything else, and that many players, I'm sure, were still able to enjoy exploring, and that's a totally fair opinion. I absolutely respect that. As someone whose first GTA game was San Andreas, which featured 2 sprawling countrysides and a desert virtually untouched by human existence outside a select few pockets of civilization, trust me, I get it. You just had to be there. I see a lot of discussion about the scope of open world games in modern times as people really start to understand that bigger does not always mean better, which is a point that I firmly agree with. And this game is always used in that discussion as, really, despite how it feels super expansive and huge, even playing it in 2024, this is actually quite small compared to some of the worlds we've explored since. And this is because of how it uses the space effectively. Beaches in Vice City were mostly void of life. It really failed to sell the illusion that this was a bustling hub of urban life. But you're not going to hear me complain about walking through the scrub of forests and farmland all alone, because that makes sense. Context is everything here. Metropolitan areas feel populated and expansive despite Las Venturas, for example, really only focusing most of the narrative attention towards the Strip. You don't notice it when you venture off the beaten path and suddenly the smaller towns you come across feel isolated and cut off from everything. Let me tell you, getting arrested or killed and spawning out in the middle of bumfuck nowhere is a feeling that was mastered in this game. Not only do all of the hills and varying terrain give the game a lot more scope and elevation, which was another flaw of Vice City that I failed to mention, but the atmosphere these locations of the map create take this game on a roller coaster of genres. We already know that it's a driving game, a shooting game, it's got RPG elements now, so take a walk through the bushlands at night in the rain, and suddenly you've got a horror setting. It's this vibe that allowed this game to have such an overwhelming mythos surrounding every inch of its environment, firmly established and beloved all by itself outside of everything else from the game over the years. Again, you just had to be there. Talking of Bigfoots and Leatherfaces, cults and cryptids, all sparked by the other weird shit you can find on your journey, is either the result of a crunch team stretched too thin for the sheer volume of work needed to polish every detail, or it's the expertise of one of the most prolific studios of all time. And honestly, the answer is probably a bit of both. It's hard to fault San Andreas level design because even when you take away all of the silly stuff like military bases and jetpacks, navy bases and other cryptic details in the world building, the core of why this map is so excellent is simply the variety. Take GTA 3 for example. Everything feels the same from start to finish. Vice is the same. We get the same missions in the same locations at the end of the game that we had starting off. But San Andreas is an adventure, spanning a wide variety of suburban neighborhoods, downtown blocks of skyscrapers and social hubs of activity in Los Santos. Fierro has the steep hills, perfect for recreating all those iconic police chases and hitting some more spectacular stunt jumps, while the third city, Venturas, actually takes a back seat to the desolate, unforgiving deserts and countrysides, which offer that twist on the gameplay. It's all still crime related, but you get stuff out here that you wouldn't see otherwise, like, stealing combine harvesters and ripping off small town hicks, cross-country mountain biking and a damn airstrip all of your own to practice flying. Honestly, the centerpiece for some of the most iconic moments both for this franchise and in gaming history. How this team was able to pull this off so flawlessly with no loading screens is just unfathomable. And on the PlayStation 2 no less, a system which is notorious for being a pain in the ass to develop for and definitely the weakest of the competing platforms that this game was available on at the time. Man, there is just so much to get into. I think that's why I've been scared to cover the GTA games for all of these years, because I've just been thinking, man, where do you even start? There is just too much content, too much history, it's overwhelming. So before we really get stuck into the nitty-gritty of San Andreas, let's focus on the story for a bit first, because it may be, standalone, one of the greatest and most beloved video game stories ever told. GTA games are like a time capsule in human history. Thousands of years from now, once humans are wiped out and a new species of intelligent beings rise from the ashes of our civilization, we'll dig up and discover these time capsules and learn of the integral struggles we faced as a society. Such as hot coffee. Seriously though, West Coast life in the early 90s was such an important moment in American history. Films were being made based in the setting prior to the end of that story even being written. And there are just endless examples of artistic works inspired by and even documenting the events that took place during this time. I mean, it's the perfect setting for deep, impactful narratives to be written, and as so, the social commentary Rockstar has become famous for really established itself in this game, given that many of the topics surrounding race wars, corruption in the justice system, and street crime centered on drugs and youths are just as true and at the forefront of Western society now than it was in the decade that inspired the events of this game. It's really incredible to think about how the more things change, the more they stay the same. And I mean, if you haven't noticed already, I am a very white male. And as someone who grew up on the other side of the world, I don't feel like I have a voice in this matter, and I'm certainly not in a position to educate on black history or gang relations, Rodney King and the entire LAPD corruption scandal of the time. But that means that now I get to do one of my favourite things to do. I get to go and read, listen, and learn everything I can in order to enlighten and expand my worldview so that I can at the very least comment specifically on how all of this is portrayed within GTA. Young Melee, CJ's voice artist, who by the way is real life cousins with Sean Fontano of GTA 5 Franklin fame, has spoken out in the past about Rockstar's approach to such period pieces, suggesting that they are culture vultures injecting themselves into certain demographics to try and represent it and reap the rewards away from the genuine people involved, which is definitely true to an extent. Again, I'm not the right voice to really get into that, but I can see it and it's a shame. A few former GTA actors have all had similar gripes with the company over the years, but look, that's a discussion all for another day. At the very least, what I can say from my perspective as a player is that the dedication to that authenticity through the writing and, more importantly, the performance by the actors really does portray the feelings and atmosphere associated with life on the streets in a way that can be translated into other cultures and understood, making this story so relatable no matter a player's background. And it's a big determining factor as to why the game narratively strives for something more than generic criminal doing crazy shit. You know, I don't want to use the term anti-hero because that still has something of a negative connotation to it, but CJ is a survivor, a worker, and a family man. He's got to put work in one way or another and strives for a better life, but at the end of the day, his loyalty is to his family and trying to make a simpler way of life for everyone he loves. He's ultimately striving for that balance that I've been talking about with all of the different game mechanics, not just for himself, but the world around him, and as soon as that world gets flipped on its head, the story truly begins to expand, covering arcs such as redemption, distraction, and discovery. Opening the game up with a lot of homecoming and camaraderie is the perfect exposition we need to introduce the story, the setting, and all of the key figures amongst it in a way that informs the player, but also informs CJ, who hasn't been in this environment for some time, enabling us to relate and understand our protagonist better than most games of this era. We start by throwing up gang tags, one of the many collectible items in this huge world. We learn to take over and control gang territory, how to disrupt the flow of rival enterprises while starting to support the family on Grove Street. And once all of this is ripped away from us, suddenly the game feels hopeless and empty as you find yourself back at the bottom of the pile in an unknown place, trying to scratch and claw to regain your footing. This is when the game reintroduces the asset mechanics from Vice, where we have the opportunity to complete additional side missions to hustle for extra cash, which upon completion establishes a regular flow of income. Trucking missions, transporting goods across the map to get your neck all nice and red. We get a prologue to the events in GTA 3 with Catalina ripping off small country towns for every penny they've got, and meeting new absurd characters who juxtapose the otherwise serious undertones with more light-hearted banter and some of the more memorable and iconic missions of the franchise to date. I remember my dad walking in on me playing this once, asking what I was doing, and 12-year-old me, with no hesitation, just calmly responding, "Oh, I'm just burning all of my weed crops." And my dad was like, "What? Why would you do that?" Once I told him the cops were coming to get me, he was like, "Ah, okay. Good man." It's the only time I ever got an attaboy that I can even remember. Fuck. I remember the first time I drove into San Fierro, my mind was blown away. Finally, after so long of just messing around, to see a whole new city at your fingertips is a feeling that just can't be replicated. This is where San Andreas shows its true colours, both as an amalgamation of all of the great gaming genres, racing, shooting, espionage, management, and a living, breathing RPG, but also as CJ's vision of success as he gets out of the hood and begins to establish a new life for himself and his family. And sure, the new criminal contacts in Fierro, such as Wuzimu and Torino, still provide those backdoor methods that contribute to his success, but the foundation he's building by taking risks on small businesses, importing and exporting vehicles, and finally learning how to drive, all make up that contextual link. Whether you find yourself committed to the story progression or not, everything we have to do all fits just so perfectly that nothing feels out of place. not even moonlighting as a valet parking attendant. Everything here is introduced so expertly. Around every corner there is an opportunity, and taking the time out of your day to stop and look around never ceases to amaze with what you might find or who you might meet. I mean, there is just so much to do in this world. It's absolutely mental. I mean, to this day, I think I still struggle to comprehend just how much content there is in this game. I mean, did you know that there were courier missions? I had no idea these were even a thing until this playthrough of the game, all because I'd never accidentally jumped into one of these vehicles that triggers the side missions. And what are the chances of that happening when this game includes such a staggering fleet of different cars, trucks, planes, boats? There's just so much content here. Just when you think you've seen it all, San Andreas still has something new to offer you, from absurd completionist tasks, exploring random landmarks that don't factor into the story whatsoever, and going on the most mundane Easter egg hunts ever conceived. And yet, that's still not everything! From here we advance onto the desert region, exploring dusty ghost towns and all manner of obscure details off the beaten path, which all help to build that feeling of history around you. Like I mentioned last time, this attention to detail feels like you're seeing the results of someone else's playthrough. The world feels lived in, whether you're clued into the series canon or not. But if you are, then Los Venturas really ties it all together with returning characters and locations, all culminating with the bank heist at Caligula's casino. While not the first big heist of the franchise, Vice did it previously, needing to establish a crew and having to complete setup missions prior, man, it was nothing like this. You didn't have to get inside of a girl in order to get inside the vault, if you know what I'm saying. Look, as unforgettable as all of these story beats are, I do want to play devil's advocate for a moment, because I think it's important to establish that no game is ever perfect, not even the greatest games of all time, and being a critical asshole also just happens to be my specialty. Even as a kid, I was able to recognise that the absurdity of this adventure, in a lot of ways, downplays the severity of the events that inspired it, and possibly starts to even become a parody of itself at times, with just how far removed Act 1 of the game is from Act 3. So now, let's explore Satirical Misunderstanding.
Carl Johnson, my man. I need you to do me another favor.
Now, purely on a video game basis, I mean, you can't really complain about this, right? Because like I said, it's got everything. Doesn't matter the mood you're in, you can probably find something here to fill your time in with productively. For example, if you're a Euro Truck Simulator nerd, well, we've got the aforementioned trucking missions, but now there is also the quarry missions as well, if driving big rigs and operating slow-ass machinery is your aphrodisiac. And speaking of, you can even drive the trains and deliver freight, which is probably the most boring pedestrian job in the franchise, but hey, it's still nice to have something different with its own set of skills to master. And what about the social drama and sex appeal of dating sims? Well, good news, because there are plenty of fish in this sea, and CJ can date all of them. From Denise on the Grove, whom we saved from a house fire in a bad part of town, to Millie, the casino chick, but also the others you may encounter on your journey, such as Barbara, the small town cop, Michelle, the mechanic, Katie, the doctor who looks after you if you're in the hospital, and Helena Wankstain, which, yes, that is her official name, who fucks in a barn on the first date. Yeah. As you may have heard, this is always a big talking point for San Andreas. Adult content in video games, cut sex scenes, hot coffee, all of that. It's nothing that I really need to get into here. As the game stands as is, if you get lucky, then the San Andreas Fault gives you a little earthquake cutscene, but with a simple fix, you can unlock the censored scenes for some less than pleasurable gameplay.
Go, girl. I hope you're a girl.
What I find much more fascinating about all of this is that these mechanics were even included in the first place. I mean, honestly, who wants to be doing this? What if my mum walks in? What the fuck is this? Not only do we have to manage businesses and gang territory, now we've also got to manage relationships with multiple girls across 3 different maps, and expecting a bunch of basement-dwelling video game nerds to be able to do that? Well, you better believe that they cracked the code a long time ago, making each relationship encounter more robotic than dating an AI ever will be. It almost becomes a chore knowing when people are available and getting into that routine to keep up appearances in between all the other crazy shit we're doing. While The Sims 2 definitely featured the more robust dating mechanics of 2004, it's the fact that we can take these girls to dinner or drinks, and that each have their own preferences and dislikes, which really make this aspect of the game so bizarre to me, even after all these years. I mean, who looked at this and thought, yeah, this needs more real life struggle? I mean, fuck man, I've dated more girls in GTA than I have in real life, for fuck's sake. But why would you take the time to do this? Well, because you get perks, of course. Barbara lets you keep your guns if you go to jail, Michelle can fix up your car for free, and Helena puts out on the first date. I don't know. I never really got far with Miss Wankstein. So, what's my point? Because I haven't played this game so thoroughly since I was a kid, I'd never actually considered the notion that perhaps this gameplay was negatively impacting our brains for those of us who played the game at an impressionable age. Listen, I don't want to get on my soapbox and preach here or anything like that, but in a real world where perceptions and societal expectations around sex are already toxic as fuck, having a game mechanic where you only date women for their perks and benefits is kind of fucked up, if you ask me. However, from a purely gameplay perspective, I'm still glad that this was included because it can lead to some really interesting moments. For example, if you're dating Katie and Michelle simultaneously, after shredding up the dance floor and shredding between the sheets with Katie, you can borrow her car, which is a white hearse, drive down the road to pick up Michelle for a date who wants to drive the car that you're in, and now we're forced to watch as one girlfriend whips shitties on another girlfriend's front lawn with her own car. I mean, man, nowhere else other than Grand Theft Auto would you be able to create a scenario like that. Holy fuck. Alternatively, if you respect your girl, then you can go dumpster diving for used toys and bring them back to her, and she'll blow you right there in the parking lot. It's funny, but still a really bizarre oddity to come out of this game. So why am I making such a big deal out of this? Well, because this is probably the most famous example of the content in this game glorifying and perhaps overshining the otherwise very grounded and very real-world scenarios that this game takes liberties recreating. I guess the question that I'm trying to ask here is, where is the line drawn between this game representing and celebrating this culture, or simply undermining its value through the parody and the ultimately lack of focus on that subject? Does it not feel a bit odd how this game that was so gripped on creating a realistic and more relatable depiction of life on the streets during this era as a portrait or potentially even a love letter to those who lived it firsthand, does it not feel odd just how far away we get from that narratively? I mean, we're out here breaking into Roswell and stealing jetpacks, racing monster trucks and jumping aircrafts mid-air in these spectacular movie scenes. It can feel disingenuous at times when you look at the whole picture. For such a time-honoured game, so fondly remembered through both a pop culture as well as a historical lens that has the potential for sparking education on such critical topics and trying to inspire actual real-world change, these themes have ultimately been forgotten in favour of the absurd. And you know what? The way the game handles this within the narrative is actually exceptional.
Hey man, we off to our new spot. We got a mansion, sweet. We've been putting in work, and shit is going well. We got a stake in the casino, we got some insane shit in Fierro, we get into the rap game. Hey man, Let me get you some new clothes, come on.
New clothes? Nigga, what the fuck is this bullshit?
What you mean, man? What's mine is yours, and you know that.
You never did get it, did you, Carl? I need to go check on things in the hood. Man, that's the problem. You always a perpetrator, running from what's real.
Hey, man, shit's fucked up there. You don't want to be in the hood.
No, that's exactly where I want to be. What you done for our hood?
Man, what the hood done for me? Always dragging me down. Ever since I got out the hood, shit been cracking. That's everybody's dream to get out the hood.
Man, you sound just like Smoke right now.
But unfortunately also illustrates the game's greatest failing in my opinion. The final act of the game really feels like it comes out of nowhere because man is it rushed. Following the not guilty verdict for Tenpenny, the city erupts into riots with looting and carnage on the streets. Quite the brave parody if you ask me, but it's actually quite effective and still hasn't been matched atmospherically in any game since, I'd argue. But now we're suddenly back to the mundane opening tasks we started with hours and hours ago. This end of the game is abruptly brick-walled until you're able to claim back enough gang territory, which is just monotonous gunfights that by this point don't really feel like anything other than time wasting. The final mission of the game is of course the only exception to this, but I do really find it to be a shame how San Andreas clearly wanted to hone its attention in on the conflict of interest within the story as Sweet and CJ bicker about the family's future, but clearly rushed this out the door during development, and maybe they weren't given a chance to breathe and explore it further. So the result of this expansive game that seems to never end, drenched in such a severely realistic and down-to-earth tone, doesn't get its payoff. Well, not enough of one anyway, as the ending just really falls off hard. When you've got so much to offer and so much of it is given a sense of purpose within the greater narrative, anything out of left field just sort of becomes kind of absurd and ruins a lot of that good work in my opinion. And look, again, I ain't knocking this stuff because it is still fun, and at the end of the day, this is just a video game. But it's clear that Rockstar were faced with a very serious decision following this game. A decision that would affect the future of the entire franchise. Realism? Or really fucking stupid? And you can see this so clearly in the games that would follow. Passing over the PSP prequels, you've got GTA 4 which attempted the realistic approach, while GTA 5 flipped the switch and fully enabled the grossly ridiculous nature that was so beloved by some of these classic San Andreas concepts. And look, both games were ultimately incredible for very different reasons, and hotly debated among the community on which was superior. And the answer to that question is San Andreas was superior, because to this day, it's been universally accepted that this game did achieve both sides of the coin exceptionally well. With one hand gripped firmly on delivering a narrative and set pieces that hit very close to home with reality and the life that this artwork was imitating, but also all of that fun, dumb shit which created memories that have lasted lifetimes and somehow, despite whatever counterpoints I may have tried to represent, are all ultimately a moot point when you see the whole picture of what this game achieved. The truest open world sandbox where anything is possible. And that is the reason this game will outlive us all. The only question now is, can GTA San Andreas pop my cherry and secure my very first 10 out of 10? I never actually completed this game 100% despite all of the hours that I put into it when I was younger. I mean, just look at this save file. Look at those hours, man. And I know that ain't even a drop in the ocean compared to some other people. I was always far too busy playing the gambling mini games or messing around with cheats to focus too much on finishing everything. My favourite thing to do was always use the flying car cheat combined with the crane in Fierro Harbour. This is so much fun, dude. Doing this again for the first time in perhaps 15 years for me is a real trip. And look, let's not forget exploring all of the out-of-bounds areas and really being sucked into the culture of GTA myths and secrets of a bygone era. It's one of those you really had to be there kind of things that's almost impossible to describe, and honestly, that deserves a whole video of its own. So I suggest that if you want to hear more about that, go peep my boy Joyless, who has more GTA bangers over on his channel. But regarding 100%, I feel like, I mean, look, this is probably going to be the last chance I get in life to actually sit and dedicate some serious hours into this game. So I really wanted that hundo for this playthrough, so let's very quickly just go over a lot of the different elements of that and how they're integrated within the world. One of the big things I've been critical of with the GTA games is their collectibles. Coming out of GTA 3, which I'd never realised did such a good job of incorporating hidden items into the game's environmental structure, as it allowed for some light puzzle solving elements and even dipped into the boundaries of being a platformer at times, I was so impressed that I ended up criticising Vice City for failing to capture that same magic, which a few people criticised my judgment on that, suggesting that perhaps I was looking for something that maybe shouldn't have even been there. But that's exactly it, right? It shouldn't have been there in GTA 3, but it was. So that's the standard it's set, and with San Andreas really just going full no fucks given into being a melting pot of every video game genre ever, I'm sad to see that the vast majority of collectibles I'd put off doing for so many years sadly failed to capture that feeling once again. The gang tags are relatively simple, just scattered in alleyways and hidden spots, but don't offer any actual thought process outside of their introductory mission. The same can be said for the horseshoes, which increase your luck at the gambling minigames, which are all just randomly plonked all over Venturas, needing preferably the jetpack to just drone around getting them all. The oysters I really don't like, as they're spread across the entire map, but thankfully are mostly around larger points of interest, such as the bridges and ships, or otherwise in some swimming pools. The only collectible in this game that I really like are the photography points in San Fierro. Quick childhood memory, sorry, just let me get this out there. I distinctly remember as a kid planning this big road trip roleplay where I'd travel the map in a caravan, abiding by road laws and stopping in small towns to complete odd jobs for some extra cash, while photographing the entire trip. And on the PlayStation 2, any pictures that you took could be saved to the memory card, which is a really gnarly trip seeing all these years later, let me tell you. But it was on this trip as a kid, I was driving into San Fierro that I noticed this weird blinking light, and thinking that it might be aliens or a Bigfoot or just a funny glitch, I grabbed for my camera, at which point I discovered this collectible hidden in plain sight. And I thought that was incredible, and I still do. Photographing landmarks in the city is something that you may accidentally stumble into regardless, but actually having that indicator hidden in plain sight made the tedium of finding these locations all the more fun and delivered an Easter egg hunt like we were all looking for. I mean, plus having the ability to see these auras through the heat vision goggles really turned it into such a cool element of completion for me. But that might be my only highlight. Most of everything else on the to-do list can be easily acquired just through normal gameplay and sheer time spent. Surprisingly, with the amount of gameplay content here, just how much of it actually isn't even necessary at all to get that 100% status is kind of shocking. As with the invention of the modern open world completionist checklist that San Andreas really introduced and popularised within the medium, I found myself sadly underwhelmed when I delivered that final car for export and got the message. After all that work, just having nothing more than a few comical vehicle spawns as my reward was almost like a little slap in the face, incomparable to the reward of those formative memories I had from just simply experiencing the world my way as an adolescent.
Welcome to San Andreas, I'm CJ from Grove Street. Landed the heinous, gangbangers in cold heat. In Los Santos, neighbors get no sleep. Beefing with anybody, competing, even police. OD deep in the green rag with gold feet, last with the flag on the strap. That's OG. Stay in shape, hit the gym, lift the weights. Get super cutter, big and buff, nice and straight. You got stats, respect, weapon, skill, stamina, muscle, fat, and sex appeal. You get clothes from Vincos and Prolapse, suburban zip, victim and desatch. Watch your back when in rival hoods. They'll test just to guess if your survival's good. Ducking shells at the clucking bell. Jump out, busting gun until they tuck their tail. It seemed like I'm on a
All we had to do was follow the damn train, CJ.
Listen, this is a once-in-a-lifetime game, no question about it. Everyone at some point has played it and can get the gist of it, but without being there in the moment, at the perfect time of release during the dawn of internet culture as we know it today, with forums and early YouTube all fueling this game to become larger than life like nothing else, simply could never be achieved again. And that's okay. Look, I feel honoured that I got to be there for this one, and I'm so stoked that even for those of you who maybe weren't there for it, that there is still just an undying appreciation for San Andreas and everything this game tried to be, thanks to the overwhelming standards that it set. It's an epic story with highs and lows, one that allows thorough expansion upon by the player's own actions and wishes, defining what a sandbox is and showing the technical potential for all games already leaning towards the next generation. If I could fault one thing, it would be the rushed elements. I mean, sometimes planes will just fall out of the sky, which is hilarious and I love it, but more so, I'm addressing the disconnected core ideas and a payoff that is fumbled just a little bit. But look, whether you love it or hate it, it's impossible to argue that San Andreas was impossible to follow. For each of its unique qualities, there was almost definitely a better option to be found somewhere else, be it for racing or action gameplay, exploration, or even dating. But nothing else did everything all wrapped up in a neat little package better than this iconic masterpiece. So, GTA San Andreas gets a very heartfelt 9 out of 10. To the game that redefined my entire perception of the medium, a game that shaped not just my formative years, but also the child and teenhoods of everyone watching, I hope that this rambling tribute of mine is considered up to par in representing one of the greatest games of all time, because in all honesty, objectively speaking, what actually made this game the greatest of all time was the players. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope you have a great fucking day. I just want to say a special thanks to all of the amazing people supporting the channel over on Patreon. If you want to see more GTA content, then I've just uploaded an exclusive video over there where I attempt to play the game blindfolded. So if you think I've earned it, then chuck a couple of bucks towards the next video. Thanks so much for 60,000 subscribers, and stay tuned for some big projects coming real soon.